Hello. All right, we've got a great group coming in here. Hello, and welcome to our May Lunch and Learn session presented by the Art of Access Alliance. Here you are, you're in the right place. My name is Jamila Rishardi. I use the pronouns she, her, hers, and it's my pleasure to welcome you to this Zoom space today. I have dark curly hair, and I'm wearing a turquoise blouse and silver hoop earrings, and I'm sitting in a chair in front of a bookshelf. I'm the Visitor and Volunteer Services Manager at Redline Contemporary Art Center in Denver, Colorado, which is part of the Art of Access Alliance. The Art of Access Alliance is a group of individuals and organizations who work to advance and connect accessible and inclusive practices across Denver's cultural organizations through professional development opportunities, such as today's Lunch and Learn, advocacy work, as well as resource sharing. You can learn more by visiting www.artofaccessdenver.com. These Lunch and Learns are casual presentations that bring together practitioners in the field to discuss relevant topics that address and help break down accessibility barriers. Today's topic is online image description and alt text, and our presenters are Matt Popke and Amy Siegel. Before we begin, I'd like to set the tone a little bit. This is a presentation, but it's meant to be very relaxed and very casual and conversational. If you have any comments or questions, please feel free to type them out using the chat feature at any point. We will also reserve some time at the end for questions and answers, and you may choose to go on camera and off mute at that time. Since this is a lunchtime gathering, at least here in the Rocky Mountain time zone, please know that it's okay to munch or snack while the presentation is going on, and please don't forget to stay hydrated. What I'm saying here is relax, take care of yourself, get cozy, grab a blanket. It's kind of a chilly spring day here in Colorado, and just sit back. This will be fun and very informative. I also want to note that today's Lunch and Learn has auto-generated captions. To turn on these captions, look at the bottom of your Zoom window and click the up arrow button next to Close Caption. Then click on Show Subtitle to start displaying the captions. Each participant has the option to show or hide captions within their own Zoom window. To hide the captions, you can click the up arrow next to Close Caption and then simply click on Hide Subtitle. Today's Lunch and Learn also has ASL interpretation. We have spotlighted Amanda and Amber, our interpreters. Thank you both for being here, Amanda and Amber. We are also recording this session and will be posting the full video on our YouTube page. We will share a link to the recording that you can view again or share with others. We will also be sending helpful links, resources, and the slideshow presentations to registrants after today. Please do let us know via chat if you have any questions or issues at any point. This whole event is presented in a spirit of listening and learning, and we are all learners here. With that in mind, we gather today to share ideas about how we can be more inclusive and leverage our work to break down barriers via this digital format using equipment and high-speed internet that we acknowledge is not available in or accessible to many communities. This technology, which for many of us has now become central to our daily lives, leaves a significant footprint and contributes to changing climates that disproportionately affect Indigenous people, as well as other marginalized groups. Although we are here together virtually, separated by distance, in different geographical locations, collectively, we all sit on unceded land that was once occupied and inhabited by hundreds of Native tribes. This is a history that we must acknowledge since it affects our present and will continue to impact our future. We humbly seek to understand our place within this context as individuals and organizations, and we encourage you all to reflect on this as well. Thank you again to the Art of Access Alliance Denver members, to Access Gallery, the Denver Art Museum, and Redline for their support of today's Lunch and Learn. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenters. Amy Siegel is the Marketing and Sales Specialist at Access Gallery. She has over 30 years of experience in the corporate realm of design, and in 2017, Amy received the American Institute of Graphic Arts Colorado Fellow Award in recognition of her significant contribution to raising the standards of excellence in practice and conduct within her local design community. Today, she works to share the unique story of Access Gallery, an inclusive arts-based nonprofit organization that opens doors to creative, educational, and economic opportunities for people with disabilities. Matt Popke is a software developer at the Denver Art Museum, where he is responsible for the design and implementation of content management tools. He's been working for many years to improve the accessibility of the Dam's digital offerings, but there is always more to learn and improve. We are so delighted to have both of these knowledgeable people in this space with us here today. We'll be doing a little bit of a back and forth dance, and Matt is up first. He'll begin with an overview of image description, followed by Amy, talking a bit about social media and incorporating best practices. Then we'll conclude with a group conversation. Thank you all for being here, and Matt, take it away.
Thank you, Jamila. I'm Matt Popke. I am a middle-aged white male. I have dark hair and a dark but rapidly graying short-cropped beard. I'm standing in my home office. There are a couple of prints on the wall behind me and a bookshelf to my left that is mostly filled with colorful boxes of board games. And I am here to talk about alt text on the web. I'm just going to share my screen real quick here. So, alt text on the web. Who is it for? How should we write it? First off, for those who don't already know, alt text is short for alternative text. It's a text description of an image included on a web page. It's the text description is included in the code of the page. It's not usually visible. Alt text will become visible on the page if the image itself does not load for some reason. The text will just be placed in the spot where the image was supposed to be. The primary purpose of alt text is to support visitors with visual disabilities. It's read aloud by screen readers, and it can be relayed through other assistive technology devices like Braille displays. It's really easy to talk about alt text in the abstract. What is it? What does it do? How does it work? But I think it's more useful to actually experience it a little bit. So what I'd like to do is just do a quick demo of VoiceOver. VoiceOver is the screen reader software that's built into Apple Macintosh operating systems. And what I'm going to do is just use a blog post from the Denver Art Museum website as a demonstration. And I'm just going to start up VoiceOver. Navigate past the top menu of the page until I get to the actual main content of the page. And then I'm just going to let VoiceOver take over from there and read the page. I'm going to let it read about a paragraph worth of text before it reaches the first image, and then it will read the image alt text and then a little bit of text after that, and then I'll stop the demo and just talk a little bit about what VoiceOver did to this actual content. So I'm just going to start that now. Okay, so I've navigated to the main content. Hopefully everyone can hear that. Ah, good.
So I think, Matt, when you share your screen, that you click on something that says share audio as well.
Oh, well, good. Let me redo that.
Yeah, I've done that many times, so it's okay.
Well, the also problem I've noticed is that every time someone joins the stream, I get a notification and VoiceOver helpfully reads it, which that could be fun.
I withdrew your co-host ability, so you should not be seeing that anymore.
Okay. So hopefully you can see the screen, and let's see if you can hear the audio this time.
VoiceOver on Safari. Contribute a blanket and story to new artwork by Marie. What vertical line? Zoom.us. She, her, no visible title to interact. You are currently on a button. To click this button, press Control, Option, Space. Safari. Contribute a blanket and story to new artwork by Marie. What vertical line? Denver Art Museum. Window. Contribute a blanket and story to new artwork by Marie. What vertical line? Denver Art Museum. Web content. In contribute a blanket and story to new artwork. Visited. Main. Okay. You are currently on an image.
So now I've navigated to the main content of the page. Hopefully won't get any more notifications that interrupt this. I've tried to turn them off.
Amanda Ingalls has left the meeting.
Well, okay. We'll get a few. So I'll just start the reading real quick here, and hopefully we'll get to experience this.
Close-up image of tags on blankets image. Heading level 1. A contributed blanket and story to artwork by Marie Watt. Mail by April 16th, 2021. By Madeline Barrell. March 16th, 2021. Madeline Barrell is Marie Watt's studio director. Give a blanket, share your story, and be a part of a monumental new sculpture by artist Marie Watt. The new work will be part of link each/other Marie Watt and Kanupa Hanska Luger, which opens at the Denver Art Museum on May 23rd, 2021, and will travel to the link Michael C. Carlos Museum at Emory University in Atlanta and the link Peabody Essex Museum in Salem, Massachusetts. Photo courtesy of Marie Watt. Figured link image. A stack of blankets with tags that show people's stories attached to them. Photo courtesy of Marie Watt. Heading level 2. Blanket stories. We are requesting.
Okay, so
voiceover off.
I'll turn that off and we'll just get back to this. So what voiceover does is it just reads the page from top to bottom, and it encounters it highlights landmarks in the content as it encounters them, things like headings and links and images, and those landmarks interrupt the flow of the text that you're listening to. So where an image occurs, usually between two paragraphs, you're going to have an interruption in the flow of the text to actually hear the alt text description of that image. I think that's something to keep in mind when writing alt text, is that it exists in a larger context within a page. So how should we use this information to help us, write descriptive alt text? The first thing I like to start with is, I think, one of the most important questions. Why is this image here in the first place? What does this image bring to the page? What information does it convey? What mood does it set? What purpose does it serve? Whatever alt text we write for the image, it should try to serve the same purpose as the image itself. Our alt text should be succinct and clear. Respect your visitors, respect the reader's time, and respect their attention. Provide the details that enrich their experience, provide the details that communicate what need to be communicated in the page, but don't go overboard, because it is an interruption in the flow of the text, and that can be more distracting than helpful. Try not to repeat information in the alt text that is already in the surrounding text. What I like to say is nobody wants to hear the image caption twice. That doesn't help anyone. So try to make sure that the alt text is unique and it isn't derivative or repetitive. Only put as much as you need to put in there. Really important point, if there is any text in the image itself, if it's a graphic or if it's a photograph of some signage or a photograph of any written text represented at all, make sure that that text is included in the alt text. If there's anything that a visitor can read when looking at the image, it should be available to someone who isn't looking at the image. A couple of sort of outlier situations on websites. Active images are images that do something when you interact with them. Think of like icons, buttons, that sort of thing. When you're putting alt text on an image that is interactive or has an active purpose, it's better to describe the action that that image performs rather than the appearance of that image. So instead of saying, here's a graphic description of a Twitter logo on a blog post, just say, share this post on Twitter. Describe the action that that logo does rather than the appearance of the logo itself. Graphs and charts can be tricky. When you're dealing with graphical representations of information, they're usually very efficient ways to put a lot of information in a small space. And that can be a difficult thing to convey in alt text without creating a big sidebar distraction for the reader to have to, wade through before they get back to the main text. So try to focus on the most important information on a graph in the alt text. Try to pull out the key highlights or the key takeaways from that graph rather than just the entire thing. And then try to provide an alternative representation of the rest of the information in that graph if it's important. So an HTML table somewhere else on the page, an accessible document that could be downloaded, whatever is appropriate for the particular information that you're representing. But again, the goal is to make sure that a person who isn't seeing the image gets the same quality of experience and the same amount of information as someone who is seeing the image. So a couple of examples. And before I go into these examples, I just want to call out the fact I work with a great web team at the Denver Art Museum. I write the software that they use, but I don't actually create most of the content. So I want to make sure I give credit where credit is due here to Carlene Bryce, Jeremy Medina, and Christina Vufam, who actually do most of the alt text writing on our site. So I'm going to try and describe this slide here. On this slide, there is a screenshot of a portion of the Denver Art Museum website, particularly on our Plan Your Visit page. And on the left half of this page is about 3 paragraphs of information about the COVID-19 safety measures we're taking at the museum, including a contact address for people with questions, and particularly in bold text, the sort of key takeaway: a face mask is required if you're visiting the museum. To the right of this block of text is a photograph of a woman standing in our galleries looking at a painting while wearing a mask. You can't really tell what the painting is from this angle unless you're much better at art history than I am. And there's another visitor standing in the background, kind of out of focus in blur, who's also looking at a different painting wearing a mask. But we have to ask ourselves, what's the purpose of this image? And in this case, the purpose of this image is to reinforce the message of the text that's right by the image. And the key message there is, please wear a mask. So the alt text for this image simply reads, masked woman looking at a painting while social distancing. The alt text serves the same purpose that the main text serves. It's please wear a mask, please social distance. We really would appreciate that. And so we don't go into the details of the colors of the wall, the painting, the lighting, the winter clothing that people are wearing, or even the fact that there are 2 people in this image. What's really important is please wear a mask. I have another example here. This is from the blog post that we were just looking at. So I have a couple, I'll describe the photo first. So the photo is a stack of folded blankets, and attached to each of those blankets is a tag, and written on that tag is a handwritten story that is relevant to the person who donated that blanket for this particular artwork. And it's just a close-up of a corner of this artwork. It's not the whole thing. And so a short description of this photo that might be appropriate is a stack of blankets with tags that show people's stories attached to them. Pardon me. And a more detailed alt text description could be something like, close-up photo of a tall stack of folded blankets with tags attached to each blanket. The tags are hanging together in one corner of the stack, forming a visual clutter that accentuates the quantity of stories attached to the stack. That second description is a little bit more detailed and in some ways a little bit interpretive. And the question that you have to ask is, well, which one of those is a better version of alt text for this particular image? And there's unfortunately not an easy answer to this because it's always based on the context of the page. If the blog post contains a lot of that detailed information, if it's a detailed description of the artwork and what the artwork means and how the artwork communicates that meaning, maybe the details aren't necessary in the alt text because they're already present in the rest of the blog post. But if the blog post doesn't include that information, it's important for us to put it in the alt text because, again, a person who sees the image is getting that impression from the image. They're seeing the tags, the mess of tags in the corner and the hint of the stories that are written on them. Whereas a person who doesn't see the image isn't going to get that unless we share it with them some way. And that's what alt text is for. Boy, that went a lot faster here than it did in rehearsal, so that's cool. That's pretty much all I have for examples. It really boils down to ask yourself what the purpose of an image is, and make sure that the alt text serves that same purpose. And as long as you're doing that, I think you're getting it right. And it's most important, I think another thing that's important to remember is a lot of us in cultural institutions, we have sort of a perfectionism complex. Any alt text is better than no alt text, and you'll figure it out as you go. So just keep practicing and keep learning. And with that, I'm just going to hand it off to Amy, and she'll talk about alt text and social media.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Amy Siegel. I am a mature woman. I have short gray hair. I wear black rimmed glasses. I am wrapped up in a kind of a gold and white toned blanket shawl. It's a little chilly in here. I'm sitting in my home office. Behind me are several pieces of artwork by artists at Access Gallery. And I'm excited to be here to talk to you a little bit about alt text used in social media, specifically Instagram. And thank you, Matt. You've really covered a lot of ground to begin with. And I agree with you that it's better to do some than none. And it's a learning process. I myself am still learning. Social media is new to me as part of a position of what I do now in the past year. And we're trying to incorporate and be better at our alt text. So as we'll have the opportunity to share also and to practice. So I'll share my screen. Oh, it says that it's disabled screen sharing, sorry.
Okay, try it again, Amy.
Yes. Oops, sorry, make sure I get full screen here. Sorry about that. It's not letting me do full screen. Sorry, always little technical difficulties. See if sorry about that. My apologies. I'm not able to show full screen. So Matt already did a really good explanation of alt text. And in Instagram, there is a way where while you're in Instagram, you can go into advanced settings and click on write alt text, and it can generate alt text, but it only lists basic things. So really the best practice is to write your own alt text, and that's what I do. Oops. So I think in looking at a variety of organizations, and I think about maybe the cultural organizations, the art museum, many of you that are here today, that you're describing artwork, and oftentimes you'll be describing the size of the painting. And I really look to some of the disability organizations and what they're doing, because I think they really are doing an amazing job of explaining and creating and bringing more emotion into it. But that also raises questions on how do you describe someone? And I think if you're the author, it certainly makes it a lot easier. But then also we're looking at, I ask our artists, how do you want me to describe you when I'm describing your physical aspects? But if you were to close your eyes and I'll read this to you, I really feel like this really gives the emotion behind it. And it starts off with the ID. There's 3, we're not going to scroll through all 3, but there's 3 separate images. But it's very simple and to the point. Black and white photos of siblings with and without disabilities. 2 brothers, one white man with brown hair and facial hair. Behind him, his brother with short brown hair and glasses, who has Down syndrome, rests his head on top of his brother's and puts his fingers behind his brother's head to make bunny ears. So that's really a very succinct, but you can really get that. And I also feel like I read through alt text too, because oftentimes it gives them a more emotional explanation about an image too. So that really gives you the opportunity to further describe something. This website, when you're reading through a post, and typically when you're doing a post, you're describing something about what you're posting first. So that also with a screen reader is kind of leading into what is this about? And this is about Zool, and it gives you some history on her and that she's a model. And then it goes into the description. And again, it's very descriptive, talking about it's a campaign. It's a fashion campaign. She's wearing a red shirt, thick rimmed black and white red glasses. She's posing with her eyes closed. She has stained red lips and rose blush. She has blonde hair neatly tied back. In the background are clouds and blue sky. And again, it's going beyond that description, but these are beautiful photographs, and they deserve a more in-depth description. And I'd love your opinion too, Matt, because you talked about, be very specific, but you gave 2 examples. So I'd love for you to pop in on some of your thoughts on this too. Feel free to jump in and add your comments. But the example you had given before, where it's one line and then more in depth, that really gives you a better sense of what the image is about. And whoever's telling that story, or the photographer, what they were trying to show. So I want to share some examples from our Access Gallery Instagram posts. And this is based on a current show. But starting off in the description is talking about Jareth, and that he's an artist and how long he's been with the gallery. And he is an encyclopedia, and just giving that information, because that also leads into his artwork and what he does with his artwork. And then describing him, that Jareth is a young Black man. He's holding his illustration of Freddie Mercury. And we're talking about his clothing. And is that important or not important? Recently, we've been including descriptions that they're wearing face coverings. Again, it's a message that the gallery's open, we're wearing face coverings. So in a sense, so that you know that that's required still. And Jareth is standing in front of the gallery store wall. You would have to go 2, 3, 4 more sentences to describe everything on the wall behind Jareth. And so like Matt had mentioned, what are the important things? But this is a multi-post. There's more images. So then we get into talking about and describing the actual image, the piece of artwork. But there's a lot of copy, because Jareth has given information about Freddie Mercury. So the screen reader is not going to read that, but that would be a paragraph more of copy. So it's describing the image, pen and marker on board, illustration, talking about, Freddie's wearing a white tank and blue jeans, and one foot is on a speaker. He's holding a broken mic stand and is singing. And then just saying that there's facts about Freddie surrounding the illustration. And then part of this is it's a rock show, and the idea of a ticket. But again, because this is written, the screen reader's not gonna detect all that information. So for the third image, we describe a graphic image of a show ticket, and then everything that's the information about the show and the time. So it's important to include that, because the screen reader won't pick that up. And again, with Jareth, this is, when you're describing a photo, and we see this, and there's really a lot of emotion. Jareth is petting Quigley, the dog, and this was a post for International Day of Kindness, I think it was. And how do you describe this really intimate moment? And Quigley has his eyes closed and looks very happy and content. And, Jareth is softly petting Quigley's head. And, it does take time to write these things. And it's important, if that's a message and you want to convey what this photograph or image is about, or the post. So I also wanted to talk a bit about artwork, because then you're trying to describe art. This was for our yearly fundraiser, 99 Pieces. Again, in the beginning of the post, it's talking about the artist. So that gives you the opportunity to talk about what is it made out of. It's porcelain, it's ceramic. So it's part of writing about the post, so that when you get into the image description, some of that information is already there, but now describing it, because earlier in the post, just describing it's porcelain. Well, what is it? What does it look like? Painted ladies. What's a painted lady? Their houses, and it's on a grid and describing that it's light blue and teal, and that it's a variety of colors, and it's casting a shadow, and that is describing that it's dimensional then to cast a shadow. So looking for, I could have gone on for 3, 4 more, 5 more sentences, but then at some point it stops picking up the alt text or all that information. So trying to get that succinct information into your description. Again, this is another post. One of our artists, Nicole, draws dinosaurs and dragons. And this was her interpretation of a Zoom meeting with dinosaurs and dragons that is on a billboard downtown on 16th and Champa. So it's describing where it is, the location, the size. It's 9 foot by 32 foot. And then when you get into the image description, is describing Nicole. She wears glasses, has brown hair, bangs. Her hair is pulled back into a ponytail. She's holding her painting. It's segmented into squares, and each square has an illustration of a dragon or a dinosaur, talking about where she's standing and what's behind her. Well, this isn't alt text. I just wanted to give a shout out to, when you're posting videos on Instagram, that you definitely want to caption them. And we recently found, and I don't know if anybody's aware of rev.com, but amazing site. You send them your video, and we got it overnight, $1.25 per minute. And they did a beautiful job. It was perfect. They changed the background behind the text to white on black in some areas. So there were no corrections that we had to make to it. So if you have video and you don't have the capability of captioning, that's a great option to use them. And there may be others, but I'd like to give a shout out to them. They did a great job for us, and so quick. So now we're going to do a little practice. Going to show you an image, and we'd like for you to, if you'd like to participate in the chat, to do your own alt text. So Frida Kahlo was at the Denver Art Museum recently, and she is one of my favorite artists. So we want to give you 5 minutes. And if you would type in the chat your alt text for this image, how would you describe this self-portrait? Go.
I'm glad to see some of the answers start to appear. I was starting to wonder.
And these are really great descriptions too.
They are. See?
Just to jump in briefly, Amy.
Yes, please.
Something that I have been reflecting on as this presentation has been going, and something just related to alt text in general, is like with a lot of things, part of what makes this work is our ability to really slow down and observe. And once you start really engaging with a work such as this, you start to notice things and you start to try and come up with a way to articulate some of those qualities and some of those rich examples that you gave earlier from the Access Gallery's Instagram with that, really sweet moment of Jareth and the dog. How do you convey these emotions or colors or experiences? So very cool to see what people are coming up with. And thank you for that moment to pause as well. I really enjoyed that.
These are all really good descriptions. I think that really adding alt text is easy. Excuse me, but writing it is one of the hardest things to master. And I love seeing the variety. So great job. Excuse me. This also brings up a lot of questions too on, what's our responsibility when we're describing people? We've got to think about, is it race, ethnicity, gender? And Jamila, I know you're going to lead us in that next discussion because I think that's all part of this.
Definitely. And if I'm just going to read a couple of these, some really great ones coming in. Thank you for your participation, everyone. Let's see. I'm just going to pick a couple at random here. The image is of a self-portrait of Frida Kahlo. She is looking directly out at the painting with an expression that is calm and thoughtful. Her dark hair is braided and tucked back, and her dark unibrow frames her intense gaze. Her skin is brown, and she is wearing a loose white blouse with an embroidered pattern. 4 small monkeys with black fur and white furred chests surround her. 2 are peeking out of tropical leaves in the background, and a bird of paradise flower is blooming. One of the monkeys is sitting on her right arm, which she is holding bent in front of her. The overall color of the paintings are warm and tropical. That's a very descriptive one. And I like that there's also some that are just very to the point, like this one, a very comfortable and confident woman with nature and its creatures. That's equally accurate. I love it. Really fun.
But I think it also points out that it goes into some description that you may not know. Frida Kahlo, a Mexican artist. So maybe the person using their screen reader or a sighted person reading through that didn't have that information. So again, I think it provides an opportunity to create even more detail. And I thought there were 4 monkeys, but there's actually 5 monkeys. There's one right off the bottom of the canvas that I didn't notice at first when I started to write it. It was 4, and then wait, there's a 5th monkey if you just the arm. So
active looking, right? There's always something new.
But I would ask you all to look, if you are on Instagram, search some of the different disability organizations, and there's some really great descriptions. And I think you'll start to notice when it's the author is describing themselves, it seems more intimate, or more authentic too, because they're describing themselves. And I feel like I for me, describing our artists is asking them, how do you want to be portrayed? Are you comfortable with me saying that you use a wheelchair? Do you want me to describe your ethnicity, your skin color, your hair? So when you're writing alt text about somebody else, I think it's important and be sensitive to how they want to be described, versus when you're describing a painting or an image or a photograph. But again, some of those things are things that you're going to have to describe in your alt text. And I'd love to hear from anybody if they either in the chat or want to turn on, your camera and unmute, and some of your experiences and your thoughts.
Yeah, I think we can all kind of start to jump in now. We will segue now into the conversational portion of this presentation. And thank you both, Amy and Matt. I think you set the groundwork really here excellently for us. Thank you. And I've just shared some additional resources and links for alt text in social media specifically. But we've had some questions come in already through the chat. Maybe we can start with some of those. I'll go with the one that just most recently popped up, but I have a few others that I've been keeping track of. But what guidance would you give if you can't ask the person directly about how they'd like to be described? Like, for instance, an organization takes photos of an audience or a group of patrons, and then you post them on the website. That's a really good one. And yeah, let's talk about the difference between image description and image interpretation. That is kind of an interesting gray area. And what are some pitfalls that we can try to avoid in best practices? Let's start with those two. Matt, Amy, either one of you.
I feel like I could address the description and interpretation one a little bit more. It's a tough question. A lot of our cultural institutions like to present themselves as objective or neutral, and we sometimes shy away from adding interpretation of art to our descriptions of it or our writing about it. And I think, for reasons beyond alt text, I think we kind of have to get away from that. We do have to, in some ways, describe the interpretation of an image, because we know that when people see an image on our site, they're going to add some interpretation to it. They're going to see the content that the artist put in that piece. And if we just try to, back away from that in our descriptions of it in the image, we're not giving everyone the same experience. So there's always going to be some interpretation in an image. It's pretty hard to avoid that. I would say just do your best to provide a description that represents what you think this means or what we know it means. In most cases, when we're talking about artworks, we have some idea what the artist intended. That's not usually a mystery to us, so you can usually start from there. And then just be honest about it. I think is the most important thing, is just be honest with your interpretations.
Yeah, definitely. And we'll make mistakes. I certainly know that I have, and then correct them when you can. And the question about if you can't ask the person directly, and I'm thinking that you're taking a picture, maybe it's an audience in a theater potentially. And then I think it's more describing as a group of patrons, an audience is viewing a play or a theater production or the orchestra. And I'm sorry if I'm misinterpreting what that question is, without going into great detail about every single person in the audience. So it's more describing the amount of people.
Yeah, that's correct. Or a combination of a group photo versus a singular photo, even of, a person interacting at a gallery, kind of like what Matt showed earlier of a woman being masked and observing a painting.
Right.
I'm particularly interested in description for people of color and sort of how we should approach that.
Right. And, I think that's, and you read, there's different descriptions. I've done some research and where when you're describing a Black man or Black woman, that you capitalize Black. But when you describe a white woman or white man or a white person, that it's lowercase y. And I think that, there's different resources out there. And again, I'm still learning myself. And that's where I know you can't always ask, but we also wanted to describe in our photos that we are inclusive. And so, I guess I don't have an exact answer to that. It does, when you can ask how somebody wants to be described, I think that's helpful, especially if you're posting about something or someone that you don't know or can't ask.
Mm-hmm. And I think it's absolutely not just okay, but I think really actually almost, positive that we don't have a specific answer. I think that these are absolutely questions that we are asking each other, that we're going into our communities and really trying to get feedback. And this was actually a question that we had in our back pocket to really get the conversation flowing here, because what is our responsibility to include things like age, race, gender, ability in image description? And Carlene, I think, came also in the chat here, made a really excellent point that if, or it was actually maybe someone else in the chat here saying that if you mention or identify one group, it makes sense to describe that the default assumption isn't that a person is white, right? That you're really kind of trying to address a larger nuance and complexity there. And I think another thing to think about too is that the language that we use is evolving, right? It changes and we need to be flexible. So that's why I think we have sort of these best practices, but we're also, I think, open to the fact that they are shifting and evolving really day by day, month by month, as these issues come to the fore. Any other thoughts, Matt?
I think Carlene kind of beat me to it with the don't assume that the default is white.
Yeah.
But also, I think going back to one of my earlier points is, what is the purpose of this image on this page? And why did we select this particular image? And did we select an image that represents diversity that is maybe more aspirational than real? Mm-hmm. And in that case, are we being honest? Are we being, I don't know the answer to that question, but I think that's maybe the source of a lot of people's discomfort with the question is, are we accurately representing the audiences that come to our institutions, or are we tokenizing a few people who we happen to find and take a picture of? And it causes us to ask, I think, more uncomfortable questions about the institution as a whole, which is probably a good thing, but it sadly doesn't answer the question about alt text very well.
No, and I think it's kind of what it reminds me of is those infamous college brochures, right? Where I think I had friends who were always featured in those brochures year after year, and we knew exactly the reason why. So that's the kind of that's the kind of tokenization that we want to avoid. But you're absolutely right that we need to be honest, and I think we need to also lean into these kinds of potentially uncomfortable conversations, because we need to be really forthright about what we're doing and what our purpose is and who's making the selection and why. Definitely, just to underline your point. Some questions came up earlier. I want to acknowledge those before we go too far into these other discussions, but I think this actually came up, Matt, when you were demonstrating the voiceover. There were some questions about if there's any way to slow down the reading of alt text, because it can seem, maybe, especially to those of us who are maybe hearing what a screen reader sounds like for the first time or are new to it, any way that there's settings for that. And I also want to, before you answer that, just note that I think by and large, it's a technology that is used predominantly for people who are blind or low vision, and it's one of those things that you just kind of, your ear gets used to it, and it's just another way to, like, sometimes you want that speed to be really fast because you want to go through content really fast, just like, you know, those who are able to read on things on screen can start to speed read, or just your eye moves at a different pace. But what do you think, Matt?
It is configurable. My voiceover settings are at the default speed right now, that's what it's set at by default. But it can be faster or it could be slower. In my personal experience, and this is anecdotal, but in my personal experience, most people I know who use a screen reader regularly actually have it turned up faster than that. There was another question earlier that I think I was kind of want to address at the same time. Someone asked, how well do screen readers handle non-English languages? Mm-hmm. And the answer is, it depends. For voiceover in particular, if you want to read text in French or Spanish or German or Japanese, you have to download and install basically the language pack for it. Like, it has English as a default if your computer is set up in English by default. And then you can download more language packs. And then if the text is properly encoded so that the web browser knows that it's in German or French or Spanish or whatever, then the screen reader can switch to that voice for that text. But if you're not properly encoding that text, or if the person who's using the screen reader hasn't downloaded the German or French voice, then the pronunciation of non-English words is pretty bad. It kept calling Monet Monet. That sort of thing. It's a mixed bag. The technology is there to make it possible, but it requires effort both on the developer side and on the client side, on the person who's using the screen reader. So it's yes and no kind of at the same time. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm including some links in the chat as well. And please know that we will also send these links out to you via email. So if it's moving too fast, or if you can't click on the link fast enough, we will be sure to send you a whole packet of information. But these are really, really, I think, wonderful questions, and this has been very helpful and illuminating for me as well. And I think ultimately too, what everyone is saying here is that the work needs to be human-centered, human-focused, right? That there is technology, assistive technology that exists. But even like what you were just saying, Matt, even things that are coded and created by humans need to have the kind of input that is going to ultimately be useful for its intended audience. And that's only through dialogue and conversation. Amy, did you have something to say?
I did see a question about the number of characters, what's recommended, and it's not a lot. And I'd love to hear your side, or what your thoughts about this too, Matt. It's typically 125 characters, which isn't very much. And I have been trying to test this with our posts, and we're working on it now with someone who does use a screen reader to see how effective they are, because I feel like some of our posts get a little bit longer trying to describe them.
The typical recommendation is like 1 to 2 sentences. And, how long is a sentence is like asking how long is a piece of string. It's the recommendations are pretty fuzzy, and I think it's just because the problem is kind of fuzzy. Again, it really depends on the context. If there's a lot of detail about an image in the surrounding text, fantastic. That just makes everybody's life easier. And if there isn't, then I think a longer description makes sense in a lot of cases, especially, in art-centric organizations where we're talking about works of art. We're kind of on the margins there. Most of the alt text recommendations out there are intended for businesses like e-commerce or services and that sort of thing. And in that case, 1 to 2 sentences is right. So on your plan your visit page where you're selling tickets or, describing your programs, 1 to 2 sentence descriptions make sense most of the time. But when you're working with artworks, give a good description, make it meaningful.
Great. Any other questions that people want to either unmute and ask our two presenters here, or again, putting it in chat is also good. I'll try to address all the ones that come up. We're just about at 1 o'clock now, so I don't want to get too deep, but
there was an earlier
space.
Sorry, there was an earlier question about, are there screen readers for Windows as well? And yeah, there are several. The two that I can think of that are most common, there's a program that's not free called JAWS, JAWS, and there's another program called NVDA that is free. I think JAWS is slightly better than NVDA in terms of how it sounds and how accurate it is, but NVDA is 100% free. So those two are both Windows screen readers that you can use.
Yes, Danielle, we want to know more. What can we offer, and what can we share, and what can we talk about? What are you all interested out there in? Is that the sentence I said? Yes. Oh, I'm so glad. It seems like this has been very helpful. I have to agree. One more link I want to leave you all with, because it looks like we're kind of coming to a close now, is a really great website that I have recently come across that is created and developed by artists, and it's called Alt Text as Poetry. And that's something that actually I was thinking about, Amy, with some of those examples that you shared earlier. Really, really great thing to share here, that I encourage you all to do a little bit of a deeper dive there. But this has been really, really fun. I really value your knowledge, Matt and Amy, and also the knowledge and experience that this whole group brings. Really thoughtful, really engaging. Any last word here?
Just give it a try. I mean, clearly you're capable. That was some amazing descriptions. So.
Love it. Give it a try. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to make a real authentic effort. Yeah. Awesome. Everybody, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. We'll stay on just a few moments longer to receive the wave of thank yous that you're sending. And I hope you have a great rest of the week. Again, stay tuned for more information and updates on the Art of Access Denver website. And we'll be following up with all the registrants as well. So thank you, Amy. Thank you, Matt, Danielle, the whole team, everybody. You're great. Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.